Hey, how's it going, everybody? And today we're going to be reacting to the Senior Bowl rosters being revealed. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, at least on my social media, because not really sure why. I guess everybody's just caught up with the NFL playoffs and everything, and the CFP National Championship, which is going to be playing. But this is definitely really important. It's going to be playing on February 1st in Mobile, Alabama, and we're going to see just how these seniors can raise their draft stock with this one game going into the pre-draft combine and that whole process. So it's going to be super exciting. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different players at each position that I'm going to be specifically looking out for and keeping my eye on, because these are going to be people that I'm interested to see what they can do and how it looks for my team as well as other teams to consider drafting them. So let's get into it. Specifically talking about the quarterback position, I'll read out the whole list. So we have Tyler Shaw from Louisville. I'm not super high on him, but that's just me. Will Howard and Riley Leonard, of course, out of Ohio State and Notre Dame, competing in the national championship coming up here, also participating in the Senior Bowl. So they're going to have a lot of chances here, extra chances to showcase their abilities and how they can make themselves more marketable as it pertains to the draft. Then we have Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. He definitely has some stuff to prove after dudding in the CFP, and then Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, those are my two guys to definitely keep an eye on. Jackson Dart specifically because there's a lot of hype recently going on, and people saying that draft analysts and GM, certain ones have him with a higher grade generally over a guy like Bo Nix from last year, which is crazy because Bo Nix just led his Broncos team that isn't particularly good on offense in terms of talent to the playoffs in his first rookie year. So for that reason, saying that Jackson Dart would be graded more highly as a prospect over him is a little bit of a bold statement. So if this is true, if he can perform in the Senior Bowl and if he can perform in the Combine, people are saying that potentially he could be a top 10 or top 20 pick overall in the NFL draft, or even maybe just being a first rounder is going to be good for him. Now, Jalen Milroe, someone who's fallen from someone who could be a first rounder to now a second rounder or maybe even a third rounder conservatively, because his athleticism, obviously, one of the best we've seen just in general in recent memory, compared to a guy like Lamar Jackson. But, his throwing, there's a lot to be desired. Can he even throw at an NFL level? That is something that has a big question mark surrounding him. And it didn't help his bowl game against Michigan. Just the shocker of a performance that he had, it did not help his draft stock whatsoever or answer any of those question marks that are had. So he definitely needs to perform in the Senior Bowl and in the Combine to be able to answer a little bit of some of those doubters and mitigate some of that pressure. So I'm going to be looking out for those two very, very specifically. Now, as it pertains to running back, we have Donovan Edwards, big name out of Michigan, of course, cover athlete of the College Football 25 game this year. Didn't perform, just like many of the Michigan people didn't perform up to standard as they didn't make the playoff. And they just didn't meet expectations, especially with a lot of them being very highly touted going into the year. Then we have guys like Devin Neal out of Kansas, Brashard Smith out of SMU, RJ Harvey out of UCF, Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. I'm specifically going to be looking at, though, Bashal Tuden out of Virginia Tech, a guy who's about 5'11", 209, and that type of size at the NFL level is a little bit hard to be, a top tier player. And not saying it's impossible when you're a smaller running back like that, but he's definitely going to have to do a lot and work even harder to prove that he can perform at an NFL level with his size, and replicate that same productivity that he had at Virginia Tech. Now, one other guy that I'm going to be keeping an eye out, Damian Martinez, Miami, extremely exciting back who played next to Cam Ward. And I think he's going to have to prove that he can produce the same type of explosiveness and rip off those really big runs, or even just have that fall forward ability outside of the Miami O-line, because if he can, he would be an extremely exciting prospect in my opinion, and definitely do a lot to bring himself up to one of those day two running backs. Now, wide receiver. Talking about wide receiver, there's the big names that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for: Jalen Royals out of Utah State, Jalen Noel, and Jaden Higgins, the Iowa State brothers, and obviously not brothers, but play for the same team. Tez Johnson out of Oregon and Xavier Restrepo out of Miami. Just going to make sure to see that they can, do some of the same things that they do in college against the best of the best seniors. So that'll be interesting to see. Tight end is much more intriguing though, because we're going to have to see a stacked tight end class and some of the best names coming out of that class compete in the Senior Bowl. More specifically, I'm going to be looking at Harold Fannin Jr. coming out of Bowling Green, of course. I believe he had a pretty great I believe he had a pretty great bowl game, but they didn't win, obviously. So he's still going to have to prove that against the rest of these P5 players that he can do some of the same things. Is the route running still going to be there? Is he going to be able to pull off some of the same productivity that he has? Because otherwise, he's an extremely exciting prospect, and he will definitely be one of the top 3 tight ends. I would hedge my bets that he would be one of the top 3 tight ends coming off this board, and he could potentially be the next most exciting tight end prospect outside of Tyler Warren. Elijah Arroyo is another guy I'm going to be really interested to see, because coming out of Miami, similar to Damian Martinez, he has a lot to prove. Elijah Arroyo is extremely interesting though as a prospect, because he has I like to consider him a shorter version of Kyle Pitts, but he moves a lot better. So it's not in a bad way that I'm saying he's shorter, because he moves like a big slot receiver. And so if he can prove that he can do some blocking as well, showcase some blocking to alleviate some of those concerns, because that's really the only question mark. Is he going to be able to block at the NFL level? And of course, he has that receiver ability, but of course, as a tight end in the NFL, you have to be able to block on some of these downs. But if he can prove that throughout, some of these processes, if his strength is there, then, that makes it a lot better for him as a prospect, because as a receiver, he's amazing. I did forget to mention out of the wide receiver position, speaking of which, Savion Williams has extremely good size and movement at that size at the receiver slot position. He's played a good amount of snaps at the slot, and he's played a lot at wideout, obviously, coming out of TCU. His yard after catch ability as well as his route running is incredible. So I'm going to be definitely very interested to see if he can raise his draft stock, because I think he should be one of these top wide receivers coming off the board, in my personal opinion. And I also think he would be a steal of the draft if he falls to kind of like the 3rd round, 4th round. But hopefully he can be drafted earlier, of course. Out of the offensive linemen, I'm specifically going to be looking out for, guys like Armand Membu, etc. But more specifically, Gray Zabel, coming out of North Dakota State, the FCS school. He is going to need to show that he can block against these P5 D linemen. And this is going to be the showcase of that in the Senior Bowl. And if he can do so, he's definitely going to be somebody who can be a lot more trusted as a prospect, because he's already one of the top 2-3 offensive linemen, I believe. No, probably top 5 though. Probably top 5 offensive linemen on the board as far as the ratings go so far. And he can do a lot to maybe jump up into like the top 3, because outside of guys like Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks Jr., it's kind of open from there, I believe. So this is going to be going a long way for what he can prove. D lineman and pass rush, I'm just kind of going to generally be looking at this position, because that position group, because a lot of these guys, we're excited about the fact that the pass rush draft is looking good. It's looking strong. It's looking deep. However, outside of guys like Abdul Carter, there's a lot to be answered about who's going to set themselves apart. So this is going to be kind of a little mini showcase of that, who can set themselves apart from the rest of the class. And as myself as a draft enthusiast, I'm going to be looking out for that too. I'm specifically going to be keeping an eye on Mike Green, though, just because the storyline would be interesting. He's coming out of Marshall, and so to see what he can do against P5 competition, because obviously Marshall being a small school, you can pull off a lot at a smaller G5 than you can on a P5 level. So we would definitely want to see if he can stack up against the competition for sure, similar to Gray Zabel. Linebacker, I don't really have too many names to look at specifically. Cornerback and safety, of course, we have Andrew Makuba coming out of Texas, Lathan Ransom coming out of Ohio State at the safety position. Also guys like Dante Trader Jr. out of Maryland and Billy Bowman Jr. And then at DB, we have Trey Amos out of Mississippi, Maxwell Harrison out of Kentucky, Darian Porter out of Iowa State, guys like that. Azariah Thomas out of Florida State. It's not too exciting of a DB draft, unfortunately, outside of the likes of Malachi Starks and outside of guys like Makuba and Ransom. But we'll want to see, what these guys can do, who can force some takeaways during the game. And that's what I'm going to be mainly looking out for, because, these are guys we're going to want to more see like what guys have upside in the later rounds, especially because I don't think it's just really worth to go DB super high up in this draft. As far as draft class quality goes. Specialists, a couple kickers, a couple punters, of course, but nothing too much to talk about there. So yeah, let me know who you are going to be keeping an eye on throughout this entire pre-draft process. Who are you going to be looking out for in the Senior Bowl? And who are you excited for going into this draft that might be underrated? Let me know in the comments. Drop a like down below if you did enjoy. Make sure to subscribe and follow me on all socials. And definitely on Twitter, because that's where I keep most of my initial thoughts about sports. Other than that, make sure every one of you has a great weekend, have a great day, and peace.